On WDLB's Inside program, and that means we have with us here Wood County Sheriff Sean Becker. Good morning.
Good morning, Jeff. Always a pleasure to be here. Could you put that music back on a couple minutes ago that you had going?
Oh, with the COVID song?
Yeah, I really like that.
Yeah. Have you heard there's something going on around the country?
I think I'm kind of familiar with it. I don't know.
Well, we're in friendly confines here. We're all testing negative.
What'd you say?
Negative.
Was that a Freudian slip there?
Yes, because you don't talk about people who test negative. I don't think you ever hear of positive tests.
Yeah, that's true. It's true.
So, how is the department handling that? Anything different with your...
We put a lot of things in place right when the orders came out from the governor, and that they're all still in place. We've talked with other law enforcement agencies within the county. Probably the biggest thing that impacts the county as far as the sheriff's department is our jail, and we made a lot of changes down there as far as who we're going to take. As far as are we going to take specific warrants, but the jail's still open, but we're not bringing like anybody and everybody in there. It's just certain things that we allow to people to be booked in for felony matters, domestic related incidents, violent offenses, things of that nature. We're still booking people in, and we are, unfortunately, probably the most bookings that we're seeing right now are domestic related. Those are must arrest situations. So we're still seeing those, and drug offenses as well. But other minor offenses, most law enforcement agencies are referring them. And like I said, I brought this up before on our show here. Failure to appear warrants. That was one thing the judges suspended immediately, and that gave us an opportunity to take a look at that for the future. Is that something that we really want to keep doing? A lot of other law enforcement agencies and counties use they take the opportunity to go with a collections agency, that the Department of Revenue has. So that's something that we're in the process of talking about. As I mentioned before, we're doing a jail study. That's starting to get to the end of concluding that, and we did have one presentation to our Public Safety Committee. The first presentation, like this is what the material that we're putting together, Venture Architects is putting together, and just getting that ready to go to present to the entire county board. So as far as with the virus, the stuff that we implemented months ago, we're continuing to do. Obviously, we're paying attention really close to the numbers. A few of the county jails within the state have gotten positive cases. Obviously, the larger communities, Milwaukee County, Dane County, Kenosha County have had, multiple people, get booked in that have cases. The thing that worries us, a lot is our staff. We've got a lot of equipment that we've gotten to protect them. And I just hate to say this, the way things are going with the numbers right now, it's probably a matter of time that somebody does come into our jail that they're symptomatic or not. Seeing a lot of people that are asymptomatic and they don't even know they have it. And they might have already come into our jail with it and we wouldn't know, but we're taking as many precautions as we can before any book-in. We've got a screening process that everybody has to go through, but I think that we have to face reality that the way the numbers are going, it's quite a possibility that somebody will come into our facility that has it. So we just, our big thing right now is protecting our staff and board providing extra masks and respirators, and we really got the respirators to our correction staff first, just because of our jail's old, the air system isn't up to date, so we felt it was very important that the respirators that we did get that went to our correction staff. So we're prepared as we can be. One thing I can say that with the jail study and what we've been doing, our inmate population is down quite a bit for exactly what we've been talking about, not just because of the warrants, but a little bit more selective on who we're accepting into our facility. We contract with 2 other counties. Waupaca County, 75 inmates there, 25 inmates in Adams County, because the need was there, months and years ago. Now with what we're seeing, and this isn't just exclusive to Wood County, it's really all the county jails within the state have really, emptied their jail population with still keeping the community safe. We're not just opening doors and saying go. There has to be, we have criteria on who can, come in and who can be like qualified for electronic monitoring program. They'll have to be like nonviolent type, offenses that people will qualify for those programs. So with our inmate population being down, the last couple weeks, we really took a look at what we're paying, Waupaca and Adams County, and we're well below what our contract is as far as inmates. At the time, we had only 49 people in Waupaca, and we're paying for 75 a day. That's a lot of money. If you look at it, we pay per day, per inmate in Waupaca, $36 a day. Now you're taking off 25 or 26 of those, do the math. And it's been like that for a while. And then we pay $35 a day in Adams County, and we only had 19 people in there. So we were talking about, well, our inmate population, we could have 132 people in our jail. That's max. Department of Corrections only wants you to have about 80%. So really, we should only have at most like 110 people in our facility. We're down to like 60. So, we're talking, it's like, well, why do we need these contracts? Maybe we can put all the folks that we have contracted for Waupaca County and then kind of maybe get out of the Adams County contract. Well, the challenge is it's a contract, and they're not up until 2023. But we took the opportunity to renegotiate with both Waupaca and Adams County, and we felt that put everybody in Waupaca County, and then we're still well with under our inmate population, and try to save the county some money. But again, it's a contract, and we sat down with both sheriffs, and we're working through that and trying to save the county some money. We don't need that much space out of county right now, and as I mentioned before, as we move forward, when we get through this virus, there's at least, we've got an opportunity to take a look at our inmate population, and are there ways that we can work with our judges, and they've been outstanding working with us, that we can lower our inmate population safely and save the county money. Because if you look at the big picture of what we're paying right now to other counties, it's probably just with contracts, it's about $1.4 million a year. And then you add on top of that the transport costs. We hire people, full-time and part-time transport folks, that take these individuals back and forth to Wood County for court appearances, going down there when they're sentenced, and then when they get released, we got to bring them back here. We keep their property here in Wood County, and there's a lot of other things to take a look at what true costs are here. But now, like I said, the inmate population is down. This just gives us an opportunity to take a look at renegotiating, with both counties, primarily Adams County right now, to save the county some money. The need's not there right now, and it's our goal, as we move forward through this, maybe we can take a couple of these things that we've been doing and keep it going. And like I said, I mentioned the failure to pay warrants. That's one thing. Expanding our electronic monitoring program for people who qualify for it, which we have been doing, will save us money. And just by doing that and saving jail bed space saves the taxpayers money. So, so we're going in that direction. Again, the jail study, that's only part of it. Our housing out of county, and we also have to look at the facility itself. It was built in the late 80s. It's around the time I graduated high school, and so you can't tell me how old I am, but it's a few years, and we're seeing some maintenance things that are creeping up with, like any facility that is that old. And also the style of the facility is back then, that's what was built for a jail. Now you look at jails are built around 2000 newer. It's a totally different style, totally different concept, where right now our jails are a podular style, where one individual corrections officer can watch several inmates. We have a linear style jail where really the corrections officers have to they're putting a lot of foot traffic on, opening doors, looking in to check on inmates. We just upgraded our video system so our jail control person can see the whole entire jail, but that one individual can't watch every single inmate, and we require our corrections officers to check on inmates in person every half hour. Unless they're on a mental health or suicide watch, then we do it every 15 minutes or more.
Talking with Wood County Sheriff Sean Becker here on today's Inside program on WDLB this final Friday in June, talking about jail study and where it's at. By the time we cycle through the end of the month here, things may change a little bit, and Lord knows they change with COVID all the time. But a couple of things caught my ear.
Uh-oh.
One, you said we pay other jails for 75 inmates, even though we're only bringing 49?
Correct.
So they get full cost. I mean, it's a flat cost.
Correct. Right now it is. That's based on average. So what we can do is bring more inmates. The contract is 75 a day. All right. So now that we're lower, and the reason why we went down to 49 is once COVID hit, they weren't accepting anybody, and most jails weren't. So we went down that number, and now they're starting to accept more people. So we're going to bring more people, obviously, there to get to that 75, and probably will even go more because that 75 is based on an average for the entire year.
Well, two things you already know. One, then it pays us to take them there, but then you went into the incidental cost of transportation and all the other stuff. So it seems like it would be renegotiating and say, look, how about per inmate cost as opposed to...
Very good point, and that's one thing that we discussed. Right now, it's like instead of having a contract locked in at a number, it's like, well, wait a minute, why don't we go with what we actually have here per day? That would seem like more of a fair way to move forward with this, and that's something.
Because they set the numbers. They said, we're not taking anybody. Well, then you can't expect us to pay for people you're not taking.
Exactly, and that's something that we discussed. And like I said, it's based on an average, and right now with Adams County, we're looking forward to working on taking a number of 15. We don't need 25, all right, but we can do 15, and that's fair. I'd prefer to have everybody in one facility because then we're only transporting to and from one facility. But on the other side, remember, these are contracts, all right? We agreed upon these numbers, years ago, all right? But that doesn't still mean that we can't take the opportunity to look at it and redo them. So with WPACA, the number's 75. With Adams, it's 25 based on an average. How we're looking at, redoing the contract with Adams County, it's going to be based on that number, all right? Because you know what? We might need jail space again in a year. We don't know.
You use the word average, though, so we could go over?
Yes. Well, especially right now. I mean, we've been at 49 for weeks. So that puts us in a position like, okay, once we go forward and things start to open up, we can go up to, well, I believe that WPACA could probably take 10 more inmates, so we can go up to 85. So we're going to take a look at that number towards the end of the year and say, hey, we didn't get this average that's in the contract. We need to work this out. But we're in the process right now of working out with Adams. We looked at it, okay, we can put more people in one facility and keep them all there at once. And it would have been nice just to say, okay, we're done with you, Adams County. We're only going to go with Wood County because that's the need. But remember, there's a contract there, and there's a lot of money that's Adams County is counting on from us. And just to say, okay, no, we're done, can't do that legally. But we looked at this as, all right, let's look at what we really need right now. And we sat down with our sheriffs, and we're at a point where we're going to move forward with Adams with 15. That's going to save the county. You think only 10 beds isn't that much? Well, that's a lot of money. If you cost that out, $35 a day, 365 days, times 10, just you figure it out. That's a lot of money that we can save the county. So we'll see as we move forward. It's obviously an odd thing that we're all dealing with. It's not exclusive just to Wood County. A lot of the jails throughout the state have been put in a similar position where their inmate population is down. I'm just looking at potentially as we move forward with some of the things that we're implementing, not all of them, but some of them that we could look at saving the taxpayers money by saving some jail bed space, for certain, not offenses, but whether it's like Ed mentioned warrants or expanding our EMP program for people who qualify.
You mentioned, talking with Wood County Sheriff Sean Becker here, you mentioned the inmate population down. Two things. One, is that COVID related? Are arrests down? And two, can you really depend on those numbers to stay that way?
Good question. The second part of your question, I don't think we can.
When things return to normal, then
Right.
you're going to go back to.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it's hard to predict the future, but I am saying, and I said it a couple of times, some of the things that we're doing now, I think we can implement in the future, and that will save bed space. Just, we're putting together, information, been doing a lot of research just on the failure to pay warrants. And that's not just the sheriff's departments, those types of warrants, but the municipalities that do utilize us for their warrants. Basically, we're being a collections agency for other municipalities. Now, if we go in a direction of collections for those, and again, these are just forfeitures, these are civil matters, okay? That's going to save, on average, we're looking at probably around 10 bed space a day. And again, we just talked about 10 beds we're going to save in Adams County. Look at the math. I mean, look at how much money and bed space that's going to save our county. And that's just one thing that we've looked at and found that, that's a way that, if we implement something in the future, that'll have an impact. It really will. And again, going back to our electronic monitoring program, expanding that, working again with the judges to say if certain crimes, nonviolent things that qualify for that program, that can save us jail bed space too. And I've looked at it as an administrator. If we can save money, that saves the taxpayers money. And you look at the jail study, I think we all know that project is not going to be cheap, okay? And we really have to take a look at, all right, what size of facility, if the county decides to go forward with, we need.
And that's a tough question because right now you're in a downturn.
Correct.
Does that mean it's going to stay that way? And if you build more, people are going to say, well, how come you build so many
space
when you don't need them? Mm-hmm. Well, because it's someday we may. Well, I'm not paying for someday.
Right. And that's one thing with the jail study. We toured some facilities, some newer facilities that were built, in the last 5 to 10 years. And with that modular style, Eau Claire County and Green Lake County, which was very impressive, both facilities with that modular style. Eau Claire was built about 5 years ago, and Green Lake was about 10. And with those pods, you don't have to finish them. They can just be empty space sitting there. And if you need them in the future, both jails did this. Okay, it's there. Then we'll finish the project if we need to. If we don't, you could take a look at it and maybe utilize it for some other space. But it's there if you need it. It's just basically shelled out. Like that pod is there, but obviously the floors, the second floor isn't done. The doors aren't in. The bars aren't in. All the costly things aren't in. But it's there if you needed to. If you need that space for a jail or jail expansion, it's there. So both jails did that. So that's an opportunity to do that. Say we want to build a facility that would be, we're looking at based upon our inmate population before COVID, we thought a comfortable amount would be around 300. And that was all based on the inmate population at the time where we had around our inmate population, 4 or 5 months ago was fluctuating between in-house 110 to 131. So we're at our max. In fact, at that time, we were looking to get more bed space in Wapaka, and then COVID hit. And then, again, working with the judges, we figured out, okay, this is the direction we need to lower inmate population safely. And so it's a really good question, Jeff, as we move forward with what size of facility do we need if we go that direction. I still think around at least something capable to get 300 bed space. Doesn't mean we have to have 300 right now, but if we want to keep everybody within our jail, our county, that's probably the direction or where the study's coming out at.
So what you're saying is build the walls that big, just don't have to make them all
correct,
barred up and ready for
and there's other
occupancy.
Things you can look at. We talked about probation parole being under our roof. That's a state agency, but maybe that's a possibility and a revenue source where they rent space from somebody else. Why not potentially us when their lease is up in Wisconsin Rapids? They're just a part of they're an arm of law enforcement. They work very close with us. Why not potentially be under our building? So there's a lot of potential, a lot of ideas to come up with as you consider this project. Timing's not the best. I mean, right now, if you look at, we don't know what the impact of the virus is going to be with our sales tax. There's obviously a big impact happening to all of us. So right now, to build a multi-million-dollar project, it's a tough sell, but it doesn't change the need.
You don't have the numbers of inmates and you don't have the money, and you're kind of looking at a moving target here on both of those. Yeah,
well, like I had mentioned, and I made it no secret, the need's been there for a long time. What COVID did, though, is it had us take a really hard look at our inmate population, and now what's going to change when things get back to normal. And I think everybody knows things aren't going to be completely normal, once the virus runs its course. And what course is that? Things will change no matter what, all right?
People who do criminal intent, though, don't really have a whole lot of whether they're wearing a mask or unless they're holding up a bang. I mean, are they that concerned about health? If you're doing something along that line, a lot of things break out. Like say, for instance, an arrest or something goes where they resist, and now you take them in. You see that quite common in this day and age. But
what isn't being accounted for during that is the backlog of referred cases or long-form cases during this time frame. So we could actually see an influx or inmate boom when things get presumably back to normal or normal-ish. Because for now, as the sheriff had mentioned, a nonviolent crime, which would still be subject to jail time at some point, that person isn't coming to jail right now. They're being summoned or cited to be appearing at a later date. At some point, they will be sentenced. So we could have, if this virus affects the way we operate for a year, you could have a year of backlog cases that weren't violent that now people will need to come to jail. We're seeing it as simple with our traffic court, something that normally takes a half hour to an hour because they're doing it regularly, weekly. We had to cancel doing traffic court for about 3 months. We had our first big day yesterday, and it took 4 hours in 2 branches. Normally it's a half hour in 1 branch, just clearing the backlog from when people couldn't appear. That's on simple traffic violations for over a couple months. So if we're talking every police agency within Wood County having to refer certain cases because they're not violent, the person doesn't need to immediately come to jail, we could see a big boom in 2021 or 2022 of these cases getting through court and people being sentenced to jail. I think it's also worth noting that during that jail study, how they arrived at like the 300 number wasn't based on a snapshot of what our population was like end of 2019, early 2020. It was based on years and years of data and trends, and actually the projections would project far more than 300 needed, but we realized, like you said, do you build for maybe? You build for what is relatively known, and when we were at our highest, if you count the inmates that were in Wapaka, that were in Adams County, that were in our facility, and were on electronic monitoring, our numbers were in the 270s. So it's quite an undertaking. As with anything, COVID has made its imprint on it. It's made us reflect on how we do things, made us more efficient in some ways with video court and video appearances, and things that I think we'll keep doing going into the future. I think it's also worth noting that with how we screened the offenses that we brought into our jail or allowed to come into our jail, while it was new for our area and in result or in as a consequence of COVID, it is something that's being done all over the state already in areas that are just plain trying to manage their jail population. Over in the Fox Valley area, I know they have a rubric, if you will, on whether people are allowed to be brought into the jail or not. That's similar to the vetting process we're using, and theirs wasn't for COVID. It was because of jail overcrowding. So what we're doing isn't unheard of. It's just new to us in I guess, an attempt to deal with the COVID and keep everyone safe, especially our staff.
He's Quentin Ellis is not undersheriff anymore. What is the title now?
Oh, I'm operations captain.
Ooh, that changed, didn't it? Ooh.
No, we changed that a few months back. We had taken a look at, what ways we could, I wouldn't say improve, but just look at things a little bit different on our way our leadership team looked at, appeared. And so Quentin oversees the patrol division, security division, and investigations. Now, the security division still has a lieutenant that runs the program, and so does our investigation, division as well has a lieutenant that oversees that. But then they answer to Quentin. So just a different level of leadership we thought that we'd implement, and it's going really well. Quentin's been with the Sheriff's Department several years. He started his career part-time, in our part-time program that's been around since the 80s. He didn't start in the 80s, so I don't think he was born yet, but he started his career there, worked his way into corrections and dispatch. From there, he left for a very, very short time. He worked up in Everest Metro Police Department. Then we hired him back, fortunately, and he's been with us for many years, at many different levels of leadership. I've been enjoying working with him at all of them. So proud to have him here.
Well, let me ask you a management question then.
Oh.
Yes, and that is, when you have more levels, are you requiring everybody to get permission? Because
No.
the lieutenant has to ask, then has to ask, because
No.
that leads to a bottleneck of decision making.
If anybody knows me really well, I really revolve around trust. People are in leadership positions for a reason. Obviously, if a major incident happens, the expectation is, you let your next level of leadership know, but you have to trust your people. And that's probably the biggest thing that I really go on. I get notified of situations that I need to. If it's something that needs to be something like a major incident, I'm obviously going to get the call. And same with Quentin, or Randy, our chief deputy. But the rest of it, like case in point, that I'm really proud of our deputies. We have a policy on pursuits, and recently we had deputies on their own call them off. They get involved in a pursuit, and their supervisor isn't calling off, the deputy is, because they don't feel comfortable continuing on with this pursuit. And that's their decision. It's not mine. Our policy clearly dictates that the deputy makes that decision. A supervisor can too, don't get me wrong. But we had, one of our deputies a few nights ago get into a pursuit, and he's not even a year on the job, and he terminated himself. That just shows the level of, I go back to trust that, all right, you made, that was your decision. If you wanted to keep going, that's up to you. All right, you're the one in the pursuit. I'm not. All right, but they decided, that, I'm going to terminate it and go on from there.
But when something happens and there's a crash, and maybe an innocent citizen gets hurt because they're flying through with the lights on, the siren going, and they didn't see it or whatever, and they blew a stop sign with the lights on, trying to stay with the guy, and then you're the one that's in front of the cameras going, this is what the department policy is, and I just let our deputies decide, and everybody's going, excuse me?
Well, as long as they act within policy, and I think a big thing that Sean alluded to, but I can expand on a bit, is our job as administrators at the department really revolves around servant leadership, and that we do the behind the scenes stuff. We set policy, we do our best to budget for and get the equipment they need, and do the behind the scenes things to make sure the department operates and provides our staff with the tools and the training and the support that they need to go out and do their job, whether it be in our front office, investigations, the men and women out in the squad cars, and our correction staff. Our job is to get them the tools, the training, and the support they need to do their job job every day. They're the department, right? We get to set the direction for it. And yes, when things go badly, your leaders have to step up and explain why it took place, and sometimes take the heat on that. That's what we're there for. And our staff needs to realize that. We have excellent staff. They're very well trained. I think that's something worth noting with all that's going on in the media and around the nation now is in Wisconsin, the cops and corrections officers are trained at a top-notch level, and we look to do that for our staff so that they have that training experience that gets them through those tough times and policy to guide their decision-making. But as far as you're saying the bottleneck, no, it doesn't require, captain or chief deputy or sheriff approval to do a majority of things. Obviously, as they get more serious, we're going to be more involved. But that's the purpose of policy, is to set that direction for our staff to follow, to protect them, the community, and the department.
One big thing to jump on that too a little bit is the staff needs to know that administration, their leaders have their back, and especially right now. It is very important that the leaders of any organization, a law enforcement organization, with the way things are, the way the media has portrayed some of us, the staff need to know, and they do, and I hope they do, that whether they're a corrections officer, a deputy investigator, or sergeant, lieutenant, captain, that we have your back. And I alluded to trust. That is huge. You have to trust your staff, and I do immensely from top to bottom, and they know that I support them.
Talking with Wood County Sheriff Sean Becker today on the Insight program this final Friday in the month of June. Some of the things we've talked about here on video will be played over throughout the month on 989, your Spectrum digital tier in the Marshfield area. So I say that because some of the things that we talked about, including jail study and other things, and within the COVID times we live in here, may have changed since then. But we'll talk more about that situation here with law enforcement in general. I haven't had a chance to visit with you guys about your feelings about what's happened here. I talked with PD in Marshfield, but we'll talk about that world they live in now here on WDLB's Insight program. WDLB's Insight program for the final Friday in the month of June. Last Friday of the month, Wood County Sheriff Sean Becker avails himself to us, to me, and your questions as well on what's on your mind as far as that's concerned. We've talked about the jail study, which is a multi-million-dollar project that every county goes through, and kind of county board rolls their eyes and goes, well, how are we going to do this without having to increase tax rates, and then living in the COVID times when revenues are down and all of that is, it's a different world, and you're in the middle of something here. We've talked about how you're going to handle populations, whether or not that is going to be the future, or if it's just a dip in the trends because of the times, or and we talked about some of the type of arrests that were made. We were talking about, you mentioned pursuit, but policies was one thing, and procedures that may or may not have been followed in some cases here around the country, as we've seen some of the national cases. And there's also, I won't ask you to read me the policy book on every possible thing that could go wrong, but you said you trust your people. So what kind of policies, procedures do you tell them about, and what kind of training do they go through?
Well, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
We adjusted our policy manual a few years back, which was quite an undertaking. Wood County had historically written their own policies.
Is that common for sheriff's departments?
It is. But there are new, avenues available that became available to kind of protect agencies from that. And that's something that we partnered with the county board through the county, our insurance, to contract out through a service called Lexipol. There's things by different names that are like a national clearinghouse of the best practices and policies that are studied routinely by attorneys, law enforcement, teams of people that specialize in policy development and best practice. They're up to date when a statute changes within Wisconsin, or if there's a ruling that affects different policies, we get notified. It's readily available to our staff. It's available online. They can view it from their squad car. They can view it from their phone. They can view it from their home. They can view it from the office. And there's policies in there from when you can get your squad washed up to when it's appropriate to use deadly force. We are a policy-governed entity, no doubt about it. But in Wisconsin, we've recognized the need in law enforcement to be governed by these policies for a long time. This isn't something new. There's a national movement for I think it's like the top 8 or the mandated 8, and Wisconsin has mandatory policies on a number of things, from use of force to pursuit and things like that. So we have policies in place for how to investigate incidents, how to respond to emergencies, how to handle sensitive crimes, when you can take off. There are just a policy manual of over 100 and some policies that our staff get monthly quizzes on, which is another service that's made available through the Lexipol. They'll open their email and they'll have a review of the policy, a specific scenario, and a quiz on it to see how that policy should be applied in that instance. And then we can run reports to make sure our staff are doing it and whatnot. So it makes that policy manual, instead of just a binder you take off the desk or out of the shelf and blow the dust off and maybe look up and find a policy that could have been outdated. It's a living document that our staff are constantly being exposed and trained in.
I would imagine questions have come up more often in certain respects. When can you pull a weapon? What weapon do you pull? Do you pull a taser? Do you pull a beanbag? Do you pull a pistol? Well, but that's just it. And I go to the George Floyd case. As a police captain, you would never have told him to do that.
Absolutely not.
No.
But then again, under the restraint, it's not illegal to do that.
Well, it was illegal with what he did.
Well, yeah, because he killed him.
Right. Well, even during that whole time, what he was doing was, we wouldn't do that. You know, what we train in
There's a lot of chokeholds now being considered.
We don't do chokeholds. I mean, we're not trained as law enforcement officers in Wisconsin to do chokeholds. We're not. It's not in our defense and arrest tactics manual that we don't train that way. We don't train chokeholds.
Is everybody watching UFC, or where is this?
Well, I mean, where do you have a situation that a Wisconsin law enforcement officer utilized a chokehold? And I'll back up a little bit and say that the only time that you could see it could be justified that a law enforcement officer in Wisconsin used a chokehold would be under deadly force, right? And that would fall under it would fall under something that's not trained but justified under the circumstances. So if Quentin and I are into a situation, I'm the law enforcement officer, he's on top of me, and I have no other ways to defend my life, and that's the only thing that I might be able to do, right? I could be justified for that so I can save my life. But we don't train it, right? In my 25-year career, under any circumstance, have not been trained to do a chokehold under law enforcement, ever.
So, and that's in what you know, in the jurisdictions that you work for. You've mentioned Wisconsin as
Correct.
being the overarching group. There
Correct.
may have been some other places where that was.
Well, I can't speak for
tool, if you will.
We can't speak for other agencies, but if you fall under the state curriculum for defense and arrest tactics, which officers in Wisconsin have to go through to be certified, the only exception might be Milwaukee, because they have their own academy. That isn't taught in the Wisconsin defense and arrest tactics module. All the officers have to go through a 720-hour training academy on top of their college credits that it covers DAT, the hand-to-hand combat, if you will, how to arrest people. It starts with just our mere presence and escalates up through deadly force if necessary. every law enforcement officer in Wisconsin is taught to use the least amount of force that's reasonably possible to control a situation. We receive EVOC training during that academy, professional contacts, firearms trainings, and that's just the initial academy before somebody ever comes to us to be hired. Once they're hired with us, Wisconsin requires 24 hours of in-service training every year for every officer, or they can't be a cop anymore. Part of that training, firearms qualification is mandatory every year. Pursuit driving, EVOC is required every year. And then the rest of the training can be filled by what the agency feels appropriate. So to get back to your original question of how do they know, is it policy that governs when they can escalate from A to B to C? Policy will govern that to some extent, but the majority of that is addressed in training. Through the defense and arrest tactics training, we offer refreshers in it at our department. We have defensive and arrest tactics instructors. We have firearms instructors. We have pursuit driving or EVOC instructors. We have a de-escalation instructor. We have our officers attend CIT training to help with people in mental crisis, get them to the services they need. Wisconsin is really in the forefront of the nation, or certainly near the top at requiring their officers to be better with all of this training and the policies that we have in place, so that if you get an incident like we saw in Minneapolis, it doesn't pass the eye test, you know what's wrong, correct? We train our officers in a way that should not happen. Nobody hates a bad cop more than the good cops. It sullies it for all of us when somebody acts outside of what is right. And that's what the policies and procedures are in place for, is to remind the officers to do what is right.
Then why didn't they say anything in your mind?
I can't answer for that. I think I'd be speculating. And that's just... I could sit here and say, why not? I've heard conflicting reports or some information that some officers were day 1 on the job, day 4 on the job. Who knows? I don't know what that culture is like there. I know full well at our agency, I would expect any officer who went outside the norm to be intervened by the other officers, or they would be held accountable as well. We're out there to do what is right, and I believe our staff will.
Now, this is just kind of a wide-ranging question here about, now you're in administration, and it might be different for those on the road in the cruiser. Is there any reluctance? I mean, when you talk to your wife at home and your family, and you go to the reunion and they know what you do, is there any reluctance at times to be as, what would I say, active in your daily...
No, the expectation of us as administrators and deputies and law enforcement officers to do your job. What we're going through right now is Quentin, explained with our training, where I see, as much as we tout Wisconsin's law enforcement train, what we're required and what we do after the academy, and the academy throughout the years hours have been added to it, because we're seeing, oh, wait a minute, the feedback we're getting, we need more training in this area, or less in this area, or more and more in this area, where, the mental health stuff that we've talked about at length before, that type of training for law enforcement officers. What I see, what we're going through right now, it's a tough time. It's a tough time for all of us in law enforcement, because, with what happened in Minneapolis, we, number one, can't justify it. It's a tragedy at many different levels. The worst one, somebody lost their life at the hands of a law enforcement officer, ex-law enforcement officer, who is appropriately in jail right now. But that's a tough situation for all the good cops out there, because people are focusing on us. Now, what we can do as we move forward, we got a couple things we got to do. Number one, build trust back up with everybody, all right? Because when the media gets a hold of a situation, there's still an investigation going on, that we don't have all the facts. Fact is that officer killed this individual, all right? And at some time, we'll get all those facts, because we deserve them, not just because we're law enforcement officers, but the public deserves them, to see what is the true story here. The reaction's tough to watch. You know, we all support the First Amendment. Peaceful protests are fine. You know, that's where people get the opportunity to come out and share their feelings where they want change. And where I can see as we move forward here, where the changes are going to happen, will probably happen on that training. You know, is 24 hours enough to train our law enforcement officers every year? Probably not. I mean, you know, but that's the requirement. On average, you know, our deputies probably get more than that, you know, but now taking a look at that training, I think there's an opportunity there to say, hey, where can we, you know, put something else in there to implement that we have our law enforcement officers go through every year? You know, implicit bias training, something along those lines. I can see that. You know, I see that opportunity as we move forward, that our law enforcement officers now that have been on the job, we take a look at ways we can train them differently or something. I know that there's some suggestions out there coming at the federal level, even our state level, you know, where, you know, the chokehold we already talked about. You know, I really don't, you know, in our state see why, you know, that's becoming a strong discussion. I do get the big picture part, but as I mentioned, that's something we don't train. Okay, the no-knock warrant will be an issue that, or a discussion as we move forward. As a law enforcement officer, I understand the other side of things, you know, because there is a tragedy associated with this. But on the other side, you know, the no-knock warrant has been around for a long time, and people have to understand that that's not up to a law enforcement officer to get to have a no-knock warrant. The no-knock warrant has to go through the DA's office, and then a judge has to sign it, and it really has to come under two really big criteria to get that type of a warrant to search somebody's house. One, evidence destruction, and even more so, officer safety. There's got to be some information there to show that we're going in with a warrant and not knocking, that there's a strong consideration that we might get hurt. All right, and we know that information ahead of time. And that information has to be clearly presented to our DA and to our judge. So we have to look at the whole situation. Of course, for me as an administrator, I'd be really worried about losing that, and then all of a sudden we go into a situation where we get some of our cops killed, where we could have done something different to prevent that.
Talking with Wood County Sheriff Sean Becker, Operations Captain Quentin Ellis. I'll go to break with a comment. My point was that putting myself in your position, there's going up to a vehicle, there's always been a suspicion. You don't know what's going to happen. Now you've got the feeling in the back of your mind of eyes watching. Everybody's not necessarily laying for you. In some cases they are, but on the other hand, everybody's watching. We had the body cams, and that was the thing that kind of made that a moot point, where go ahead and watch. You know, we're not doing anything that wouldn't be wrong. But it's a different world today when you're out there where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. We'll talk more and wrap up our conversation here in a moment. AM 1450 WDLB's Inside program this final Friday in the month of June, talking with Wood County Sheriff Sean Becker, Operations Captain here, Quentin Ellis. We've talked about some serious stuff here, jail study, and that means inmate populations, COVID, how that's affected your operations there, and what it's going to mean for people as far as who gets held and who doesn't get held, and how those policies may change for a short period or may change for a long period. Let's talk about the time of the year here now. Again, as you're videoing, watching us, it's pre-4th. Yeah. By the time they watch this, the fireworks stands may be gone. Sure. But in the meantime,
they're listening. Yeah, that's going to be a big, and it's already started. You know, a lot of the fireworks shows have been canceled, except for Marshfield. You know, they're going to make it happen. So we're already starting to get complaints of, you know, people lighting off fireworks, and I know even the larger cities have been having a lot of issues. So we expect to have those complaints as we move forward. People need to understand that any firework that leaves the ground is probably illegal unless you get a permit where you live. Obviously, if you're within the city limits of Marshfield, Wisconsin Rapids, you're not going to get a permit. They have local ordinances, so if you are lighting fireworks off that are outside the norm of like a sparkler or something, you probably will get a ticket. All right. Now with us in the county, if you live out in a rural area, you need to talk with her. You get the permit through your township, and then you can get bigger fireworks. But that doesn't ignore the safety considerations that you need to really consider. Some townships will require that you have insurance, some proof of insurance if you're going to light anything off, like a Class C firework, and that's where you can really get almost anywhere now a Class C firework, and they're still pretty big. The mortars go up probably about 200-300 feet in the air and put on a really nice display. But with that really nice display comes a lot of other considerations, safety considerations you have to really think about, not just you as an individual, but all the people around you who are starting a fire. There's been a lot of those issues that have creeped up too, outside the area. But just remember, safety, number one. Number two, if it leaves the ground, it's probably illegal, and if you don't get a permit, you could be cited or worse.
I feel bad because it puts law enforcement in a no-win position, and you can buy them down here on the street, but you can't use them.
And we want everybody to have fun. We do. We want everybody to have a good time, have a good Fourth, but we want everybody to be safe. It is tough. We're kind of thrown in the middle there, and I think some people know the ropes, and others may not. Like you said, it's legal for them to go buy them, and the second they light them off, it's a problem. So. We're people too. We understand. We want to work with the members of our community. We want them to have fun, but more so we want them to be safe.
When would it go from a nuisance call to a... Well, I'm out of time here. I was going to say from a nuisance call to somebody being taken or a ticket being, yeah.
Oh, a ticket. Real quick, if somebody calls in saying you're lighting off fireworks, well into the darkness of the night, we come across you, you'll most likely get a ticket.
All right, Sean Becker and Quentin Ellis. Good to see you guys again.
Yeah, you too.
Thanks for having us.
All right, here on today's Insight program, this final Friday of the month of June, here on AM 1450 WDLB. I'm Jeff Cannon. We've got the program on Monday through Friday, 10 o'clock hour here on WDLB. Tuesdays, UW Extension Tuesday, and on Fridays, we've got the mayor, the sheriff, the county board, and also Marshfield PD lined up for 4 Fridays in the month.